All right, welcome to Hoops Tracker. Jerry Howard, your host. Hoops Tracker, your source for Colorado basketball. We have a great host today. We have Ryan Larsen, assistant coach at University of Utah. Ryan, we go way back, but welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate you asking me to join you and fun to talk some hoops with you.
Yeah, so coach, really quick. You and I met a long time ago when you were the head coach at South Dakota School of Mines, but talk about your basketball journey because I know, like every other coach, you wanted to play, you wanted to do some things, and it didn't quite work out. But talk about that basketball journey and how you got to be the head coach at South Dakota School of Mines, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I honestly did always grow up wanting to be a coach. Um, you know, I I really do vividly remember as a kid, shooting on my Nerf hoop, you know, uh, running plays by myself with imaginary teammates and stuff out there. It's just something I always wanted to do. Really wanted to be a high school teacher, history and geography, and coaching
Mhm.
high school basketball, maybe a little defensive backs or safety coach in the fall for football, golf coach in the spring.
Okay.
But was really fortunate to get a college job and stay in it. I was a walk-on for a year, Black Hills State. And like I was telling you earlier, you won't see me in a picture, you won't see a stat of me. The following year, Mike Olson was his name at Black Hills State University, was the head coach, and hey, I know you wanted to get into coaching, probably never going to play here, but if you want to get into coaching, be a student manager for us. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, I know I wanted to get into coaching, so what a great head start for me to do that. And they were just, Coach Olson and his staff, Adam DeHaan, Paul Nepodal, the staff there at Black Hills State at the time, just, I give those guys so much credit because they let me do a lot of things, even though I was a manager, they let me be involved. Got to sit in on their planning of practice and, listen to them talk at halftime and stuff like that. And so, they just I owe him so much for, involving me in those regards. And then,
Mhm.
it worked out where, I became a student assistant. Coach Olson went from Black Hills State to, he got a Division II job at Minnesota State Moorhead. He asked me to join him and go along with him. Which was pretty cool. And so kind of my role, even though I hadn't graduated, I transferred from Black Hills State to Moorhead. I went along as a student assistant and graduated from Moorhead. And then really, after I graduated, I worked for Coach Olson for a year, um, kind of as a stipend assistant and stuff like that. And then got a graduate degree at Augustana University now. It was Augustana College back in the day when I went there. Uh, and during that time, when I was a graduate assistant at Augustana, I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to sell out to try to be a college coach. And again, just, very, very fortunate. After Augustana, I got my very first job was at Jamestown College, and this is on the men's side yet.
Mhm.
Brad Hughes hired me at Jamestown College. I was the assistant men's basketball coach, head men's and women's golf coach, and sports information director. And I had arrived, Jerry. I was like,
Nice.
yeah, I made it, because I was just so happy to be in the college game. I didn't care about levels. I didn't care. I just wanted to be a college coach, and so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and this story gets pretty funny. So I was at Jamestown College for 2 months. Uh, the first month I was there, Coach Hughes he left Jamestown. He went to the University of Montana to be an assistant. And so, I was kind of, without a head coach at Jamestown for a month. The assistant coach that I worked with at Augustana College got the Jamestown job. And so
Yeah.
we basically, he went to Jamestown as a head coach. The head coach at Augustana called me up and said, "Hey, Ryan, you want to come back to Augustana?" And I went back to Augustana. Uh, and
Nice.
so I was there for 3 years on the men's side. And after that, that's when I got into the women's game. And I always had a lot of friends in women's basketball. One of my best friends in life His name is Travis Traphagen. We were at Black Hills State together. He's now the head coach at the University of Sioux Falls. He went from playing to got on the women's side of coaching, and I just knew a lot of friends and on the women's side, and I always kind of looked at like, what, I'm not so sure that wouldn't be best fit for me as far as coaching. Not that I didn't enjoy the men's side, I did, but I just kind of, maybe that's my personality fits women's basketball better. Maybe my
Mhm.
coaching style, my teaching style better fits women's basketball. And this name, Ryan Williams, who's now at Colorado State. He was the
Yeah.
head coach at Wayne State College. He
Mhm.
got hired at the University of South Dakota, which is his alma mater, and they are transitioning from Division II to Division I. And you know, uh, I'd known Ryan through my buddy Travis Traphagen, and Ryan called me up and he's like, "Hey, would you ever think about making the switch?" And I was like, I always have. And so the enticing change of thinking about women's basketball, and then Division I was a big part of it. I
Oh.
That's when I first got into women's basketball, was at the University of South Dakota.
Mhm.
Was there for 6 years. Fortunate to work with Ryan Williams for 5, and Amy Williams, who's now at Nebraska, for 1. I worked for Amy for 1 year at South Dakota. Uh, and after that is yeah, when I got hired, really Rapid City. So South Dakota School of Mines, I got the head job at South Dakota School of Mines, and South Dakota School of Mines is in Rapid City, South Dakota. That's exactly 45 minutes from my hometown of Spearfish, South Dakota. So very, very familiar with that job, that part of the country. A young lady I grew up with went to school there at South Dakota School of Mines, and she was all-time leading scorer there. So, I'd always followed them, cheering on Jamie.
Mhm.
Bearclaw was her name. Now Jamie Corton is her married name. So very, very familiar. And they're in the same league as Black Hills State, so in rivals. That obviously helped me getting that job. Um, Really great experience being a head coach.
Mhm.
I've said it a million times that I can't even put a percentage on. I'm, light years a better assistant coach now after being a head coach. It served me so much, just knowing what the head coach is going through, all that they got to think about, all the people they have to take care of. It's a lonely job, and so me going through that, um, it just gives me a greater appreciation for what they do, but also allows me, I think, to help them out, quite a bit
Yeah.
more as an assistant. Um, and so, yeah, 6 years at South Dakota School of Mines as the head coach. And then, really enjoyed my time there. Thankful for every minute of it. And one of the programs I wanted to kind of model South Dakota School of Mines after was the University of Wyoming in cowgirl women's basketball.
Mhm.
Joe Legursky and Gerald Mattinson. Those are two of the greatest basketball minds I had ever seen. Uh,
Mhm.
and I really did try to model South Dakota School of Mines, the Hard Rockers, after the Cowgirls a lot. And
Mhm.
Joe Legursky retired. Gerald Mattinson got the head job. And yeah, got the call there. And it was a hard decision. It's always hard to leave where you're going.
Yeah.
But I've always said it doesn't matter where I've been. I remember saying it when I left the University of South Dakota to the team. I remember saying it to the South Dakota School of Mines. I said it, at Wyoming. I've always told you, this is to the kids I've recruited and coached. If I have an opportunity to better my resume,
Mhm.
and something that's better for my family, that's something I always got to look at and, have a chance to do. And that's kind of exactly how I looked at moving from South Dakota School of Mines to Wyoming. So
Yeah.
spent
Well,
6 fantastic years there.
Well, making that transition, like you said, from being a head coach
Yeah.
and being a D2 head coach, you're wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And you're not only having to do all the stuff that they do at the D1 level, but then you're in the back office and you're breaking down film and with your assistants and you're planning
Yeah.
practice and everything, right? So then getting that opportunity to go to University of Wyoming and then, your time there, and then in the middle of last season, Lynn Roberts at Utah gets the LA Sparks job. Gavin gets promoted, and then it's all of a sudden a whirlwind. Like hey Ryan, come on, dude, come on over. I need your help. I mean, talk to me about that because that's a crazy, that doesn't normally happen in the middle of the season, right? You expect that at the end of the season or sometime, but but let's just say being a little in the know, knowing that the Sparks were recruiting a handful of college coaches to come. Um, but what was that like for you, right? I mean, just going
Yeah,
from Wyoming, and you guys were cruising along. I mean, you were happy.
yeah, yeah. No, it was. I'm going to ramble on this because it was such a strange circumstance.
Mhm.
Um, obviously, a lot of it is my friendship with Gavin Peterson, the head coach here at Utah. Now, I've known Gavin as long as I've been in women's basketball, and we first met each other in Australia, of all places. Recruiting the U18 championships. He was
Wow.
at the University of Idaho, and I was at the University of South Dakota, and we just hit it off, and we've always been, good friends since. And um, it. When Gavin did call me, well, the real story, I'm sitting home at lunch in Laramie, Wyoming, eating lunch and looking at Twitter and see the tweet, LA Sparks hire Lynn Roberts, and I go, oh, oh geez, oh boy, this is going to get interesting. And sure enough, Gavin called me that night and presented me the opportunity. And I'm not going to go in great detail to spare time,
Ah,
but without the nuts and bolts of it, after a lot of conversations with Heather Ezel, the head women's coach at Wyoming, who I think the absolute world of,
yeah.
and just as a basketball coach, but we're really really good friends too. A lot of conversations with her, the administration at Wyoming. It did not sit well with me leaving, in December. It
Right.
didn't. I got a lot of old school loyalty, in me.
Yeah.
I was brought up in that day, in the coaching ranks, and my parents also taught me that way. You got a reputation to hold up, and it was really, really tough for me to, even think about leaving Wyoming because we had a really good team.
Mhm.
I'd obviously coached and recruited all those kids.
Mhm.
But and just the staff, I loved it. I loved Wyoming. It's a fantastic job. I loved everything about it. But it really comes about kind of back to what I just said, where you don't get these opportunities very often.
Right.
When you have a chance to better your resume, um, help your family out, financially and stuff like that. And just I'm also the type of personality where I was getting pretty comfortable with Wyoming, and I could have been there the rest of my career and been
Right.
perfectly content. But I also
Mhm.
kind of getting the itch a little bit where
Mhm.
I get worried when I get comfortable, and I like to learn. I want to see something new, learn something new, get myself challenged a little bit more. Because if you're
Mhm.
not learning, you're just dying, really. And
Yeah.
so extensive conversations with, you know, I knew Gavin wanted me here, and
Yeah.
he wanted me here now because they were also short bodies here. They
Oh,
needed
yeah.
the help. Um, and you know, one thing that made me feel better about leaving in the middle of the year is it happened twice, and it both happened twice last year. Helping Coach Roberts and Coach Mesco from Florida Gulf Coast to Atlanta, and so it's never happened
Wow.
before where sitting head coaches in college go to the professional ranks during the season. So it made me feel better where it's such a unusual situation where I, it just made me feel better about, hey, I can leave in the middle of the year and, no one's really going to think less of me as far as a loyalty factor and stuff like that. But the biggest thing was the blessing from Heather at Wyoming, where, she's like, I just, I would have had a really hard time sitting and coaching the Cowgirls all season long, knowing I was leaving at the end of the year. That would have
Right.
been, that wouldn't have done them any good, and
Right.
it wouldn't have helped Utah any any better
Right.
there because they were
Right.
down a person sitting and waiting for me. And so I made that hard choice. And it was very, very difficult. Uh, Talking to the team, and telling them I was leaving in December. Uh,
Mhm.
but there again, it's just never happened before. So that made me feel better about it, if that makes sense or not, and moving the page from that, it was the right decision. It was really hard. But getting to Utah, knowing Gavin and the type of man he is and the coach that he is, helped me a bunch just being very familiar with him. Our philosophies are very similar basketball wise,
Mhm.
um, but I will say, the adjustment coming from one team to another in the middle of the season, I don't wish that on anybody.
Right.
That was hard, but yet at the same time, it was very good for me where like, hey, I just got to find ways. I don't know what the heck they're doing offensively. I barely know. I'm just starting to learn players' names, but find ways to contribute, and I remember just kind of popped in my mind, I remember, reading an article or seeing something on Sports Center years and years and years ago, or when Avery Johnson was the head coach for the Spurs, and he hired his high school coach as an assistant for the Spurs. And that his high school's coach job was strictly to coach fundamentals in the NBA. And I'm like,
Mhm.
there's ways I can contribute, if it's jump
Mhm.
stopping, playing off of 2 feet, holding your follow through, boxing out, even though I really don't know what's, the first, I'll say, 2 to 3 weeks for sure, maybe even a month, I was very, very unfamiliar with what's going on offensively and what our defensive calls and stuff are.
Mhm.
You just got to find ways to contribute. And that was good for me. It's like, hey, man, there's so many things in basketball where that, you know, we overlook at times that can make teams better.
Right.
It's throwing a better chest pass, stuff like that. And so it was kind of
Mhm.
fun to really step back in those regards and just observe and, really harp on fundamentals and just finding ways to contribute any way I could early on last year. And, even though the Utah staff was a man down, I mean, man, they were a well-oiled machine. Jordan, our recruiting coordinator, she is top notch. Morgan, our other assistant,
Mhm.
those guys, they had things under control, and it kind of felt like I wasn't doing hardly enough just because they're so good at what they do, and so,
Mhm.
um, yeah, man, it was just, I walked into a really, really well-oiled machine. It was, even though it was tough to step back and learn a little bit, it was quite the experience. Yeah.
No, that sounds great. And then going from the Mountain West into the Big 12. And I mean, you guys, towards the end of the season, I mean, there was like a 3 or 4 way tie for fourth place in the Big 12, and you were one of those teams. And you guys, performed well, went in the tournament. Um, but then now, you got teams like TCU and Baylor to deal with, and
Yeah.
a few others that, man, the level of play is a little bit different between the Mountain West and the Big 12.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm not a level guy, but
Mhm.
we do have to, reality is reality. And I mean, you got to be a really good basketball player, and you have a really good basketball team to win. I don't care at the lowest level of college basketball. You got to have really good players. You got to be a really good player just to play college basketball. Uh, but when you keep going up, and I was so impressed going from South Dakota School of Mines to the Mountain West, going, holy smokes, these players are good. These teams are good. Holy
Mhm.
cow, is it physical, and then coming here, and it was even a shock, for again, Gavin and, Jordan and Morgan, who were, coached in, or well, at least Gavin and Jordan. Morgan was at the team down south before she came to Utah, so she had a year
Right.
at the Big 12. But going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, they're like, "Phew, this is a different
That's a
beast.
big step.
It is a lot more athletic and is a lot more physical." Um, and when those guys were talking about, wow, this is so much faster and physical, and more athletic. You can only imagine how much it was for me. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, holy cow, it is just, and you gotta, you know, I hang my hat on being a pretty good defensive coach. And I mean, the things we were able to do at Wyoming to be a really, really good defensive team, you know, probably not going to get away with a lot more here in the Big 12. I mean,
Right.
you gotta, my philosophy hasn't changed much, but the way we guard people, I mean, you got to go over ball screens a heck of a lot more. You got
Mhm.
to be in gaps a lot more. And yeah, you have to close out a lot more, because people
Mhm.
just aren't missing, and yeah, it is really impressive the level of players at this level. It's really fun. And, going back to that decision of why I decided to come here, yeah, I wanted to do that. I wanted to, you
Mhm.
know, coach against, some of the best players in women's basketball. And it's
Yeah.
it's really fun. That is making me a better basketball coach. And you know, that's why we do it. We want our players to get better, and yeah, as coaches, we should hold ourselves the same standard of trying to, find ways to improve all the time ourselves.
No, that's great. Now, Coach, I'm going to ask you one last question because
Yeah.
I think it's really important for our listeners and parents and even the athletes. But what kind of advice would you give to a high school parent or an athlete right now? What are things that they should be doing to help with recruiting and help with their player development? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just like coaching, there's a million different ways, a million different ways. And, you know, my advice isn't going to mean that it's the best advice or the right advice.
Sure.
I've been asked that question on a few other podcasts before. This doesn't really directly answer your question, but sort of in a way. And I said it not too long ago. You got to be a really good player to play any level of college basketball. You have to be. I thought I was a good player, and I never got on the floor. I couldn't. I wasn't good enough, and I was on really good teams, but I just wasn't good enough. And
Mhm.
go to a level where you're going to have fun and where you're going to get on the floor, and contribute. All right. Yeah, Division 1 has 15 scholarships, but really 7 kids are playing. You know,
Mhm.
sometimes less. You know,
Mhm.
if that's something you really want to do and just be a part of Division 1, okay, great. All right, but learn to buy your time, and maybe you do get to play as a junior or senior. Okay,
Mhm.
um, and even at Division 1, okay. Division low major, mid major, I don't care. It's a really, really competitive level. All right. If you can get a chance to get a scholarship of some kind, get your education paid for while playing basketball, I don't care what level. That's a great opportunity. Same thing with Division 2. Okay. If you can get 50% scholarship
Mhm.
and get half your school paid for while playing basketball and have a great experience, I mean, that's great. You're doing a heck of a lot. You're playing a lot more basketball than I don't know what a percentage of, the rest of the
Yeah.
kids, um, but be able to even get there. I mean,
Yeah.
um, you, I think anymore, and it's a fine balance. You got to find time to get in the gym and work on your skills. You have to. Okay. And there's certain skills that I really think go overlooked anymore. Everybody's enamored with shooting, and I get that. You got to make shots. It's really important to make shots, but you know, you still got to put the ball on the floor and score at the rim every once in a while. And you're not going to get to the rim if you can't dribble with your left hand. It's
Mhm.
amazing. There have been a lot of places, uh, all high levels of basketball where there's players that really struggle with their offhand, really
Mhm.
struggle. Yeah, that's, it sounds simple and cliche, but it's really important. Okay, it's really
Right.
important. Another thing I harp on all the time, if it's high school coaches, AU coaches, or even, kids that we're recruiting that to ask me about, hey, what can I improve on?
Mhm.
It's an epidemic, Jerry, anymore of missed layups. An epidemic, and I don't care, watch NBA. They're pros, NBA, WNBA miss layups a lot, you know. And I'm not just talking, highly contested layups, not barely contested layups. Work on finishing around the rim. Okay. If you can be a high level finisher around the rim, you're going to you're going to give yourself so many more opportunities to score baskets. Okay. But that goes back to, and this is where I give, again, Joe Legursky and Gerald Mattinson, And I was so guilty as this as a head coach when I was at South Dakota School of Mines. I completely ignored, some very fine fundamentals, very fine. I'll never forget my first practice at Wyoming, and I bet we did 15 to 20 minutes of layups. I'm
Mhm.
thinking, wow, did I miss the boat on this? I was so wrong on this,
Mhm.
and but it's true. And just think about the number of missed layups you've seen over the past summer. It's again, if you can start to learn to finish around the rim better, you're going to give yourself a lot more opportunities, and that's just a small snippet of, kind of my tangent of work on the fundamentals that's going to make you a better player and stand out to college coaches. Again, I don't care what level, any college coach, that is going to want you to be a part of their team, and with that, I think just as much as you're putting time on your own
Mhm.
working on your skills, you got to play, and it's not just on the AU circuit in front of coaches. You got to get out there and play. I think that's one thing that's so missing anymore. Players, they either go to the gym and do their fundamentals, work with their trainers and stuff like that, and then they go practice with their high school team,
Yeah.
practice with their AU team, play with their AU team, but they don't really get out there and just play like we did, when we were younger, because that's all the opportunities we had. And I'm not trying to sound old man river here, but that's when you get the chance to work on all those things that you're practicing. Don't be afraid of missing those shots because you're just playing and there's no pressure. Just go play,
Right.
and go play against better competition. Okay. Challenge yourself there. Um, Hope I answered your question there. I can go on and
Oh, it was
on and
great
on. You
because
probably won't have enough time for, nobody will watch this podcast because it'll be about 3 hours long as I continue to rant and rave about this stuff. But, that's just a small tip of the iceberg that I can really try to encourage, parents and players of,
it's
how to get
it's
themselves to the next level.
the 3-point shots become very popular, right? And
Yep.
these kids sit behind the arc. I mean, I saw fifth graders the other day just hitting one, two, three. I mean, but it's like you can't be a one-dimensional player anymore. It's not like
No.
you have to. I mean, this is where I think I enjoy the influence of the European game. You
Yeah.
have to be an all-around player at all positions. You're not just a post player. You still have to work on your ball handling. You still have to work on pivoting with your right and left foot. I
Yeah.
mean, like you still have to do all these things, but make yourself a player that a coach wants, and a coach wants a multi-dimensional player.
Yeah. A couple things there, without getting too sidetracked, but hey, you talked about European basketball. Hey, I've been very fortunate to go to some of the FIBA tournaments, it's the European B championships, European A
Mhm.
championships, the U18 tournaments, I
Mhm.
was able to go to the World Cup this year, the U19 World Cup, and that probably
Mhm.
the best basketball I've seen, but
Mhm.
a lot of American high school kids need to watch European basketball to just what you're talking about, the
Mhm.
skill level that is played. And
Mhm.
there are no positions over there. There are no positions.
Right.
And the physicality is just a you think the EYBL, all right, and the shoe circuits are physical.
Mhm.
Hey, holy smokes. It is an absolute wrestling match a lot of the times, and that's why I think a lot of these, international kids come over here and really, you know, it's easy for them because it's not physical, compared to what they've grown up playing. Um, and we're restricted to 20 hours a week in season. They might get 20 hours of basketball in 3 days the way they practice over there.
Right.
It's just they really get after it, and it's all fundamental based. It's,
Mhm.
they may practice for 4 hours, and three of them, for sure, two of them, it's straight fundamentals, ball handling and passing, all that stuff. And then they go play, and you don't have a position. You got to learn to play every single position. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's it's eye opening. It's really eye opening. And last point I'll make that you brought up, people talk, it's funny watching TV broadcasts of our games after here at Utah, where they talk so much about our analytics, and we're pretty analytical driven. We do want to shoot a lot of threes and score at the rim the majority of the time. And a lot of the broadcasters say, they'll never shoot a pull-up jumper. That's not true. Okay. If you can make a pull-up jumper for us, you can shoot it. You have a green light. All right. But the hard part is finding players that can not just shoot, but make a pull-up jumper. Okay, so yeah, if you
Right.
make a pull-up jumper, we're going to recruit you. We will let you shoot them because that's a hard shot to guard. All right, and we'll put you in actions to get those shots. That's for sure. But the hard part is, it's not many people can make those shots anymore. To your point of, I think we've just really fallen in love with, shooting the three. And I love threes as much as anybody. Don't get me wrong. They're worth more than two. But yeah, you still, I love using the analogy football wise. Well, you got to hand that ball off, the football off to a running back every once in a while to be able to throw it. That's kind of how
Well,
about it here too. You got to get to the rim and score it every once in a while to make those 3-pointers easier.
yeah, you gotta mix it up a little bit because if
Yeah.
everybody's playing behind the arc, then defensively, I mean, everything changes, right? I mean, but to your point, you have to be an all-around player because if I can develop certain things and someone else can do two more things in their tool belt than I can, well, guess who's going to get playing time? They're going to get it,
Yeah,
not me.
absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Well, coach, I know you got practice and I know you got a ton of stuff going on today, but hey, Ryan, this was great. Thank you for coming on the
Thank you,
show.
Jerry. This was a lot of fun. Now
Yeah, man.
you kind of got the full experience of what recruits go through, when they're listening to me on the phone, just, me rambling and talking and getting all over the place. I don't know if I answered any of your questions, but I sure talked a lot. So you
No,
got
it
the
was
full effect
great.
there.
No, it was great, Ryan. And man, if I'm over on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, I'm definitely coming to visit because
Yeah, you got an
you
open invitation,
guys,
man.
your football program over there is pretty awesome and the facilities and everything and yeah, you guys are doing a great job and yeah, I'm looking forward to some Utah basketball this winter coming up. So we'll see.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate your time and appreciate what you do for the high school basketball, not just in Colorado, but all over. You're a
Thanks,
great
Ryan.
resource. Appreciate it.
You bet.